then we slot 5 minutes for it, but if it takes longer, it takes longer. We do not respond in real time to public comment. That does not mean that we are not listening and not taking the feedback very seriously. This is very important for our decision-making process. We try to make sure the concerns brought to us are addressed, and certainly the input is very valuable for our knowledge of what is concerning people, and also we learned quite a bit from the public comment. So it's a very important part of the meeting, but again, we don't respond in real time. I don't see any one in the audience who's not already presenting or supporting people who are presenting. So let's see if there's anyone online who would like to make public comment.
Carlin, but she's often here. It doesn't.
Was that?
Carlin's online, but I don't see her raising her hand.
All right. So no public comment. Next item is the consent agenda, which is basically pro forma things like approval of minutes and the approval of our warrant for payroll, and agendas for next meetings, etc. It's a way for us to do a lot of things quickly. And if there's an item that anyone has questions about or feels need further discussion, they can pull it from the consent agenda. Before I ask for a motion, I did notice that the
Thanks for Kristen's nudge. We made the meeting dates today. Anna made the meeting dates today.
But if you look at the heading years, it's a year off. The 2003 meetings.
Oh, she just cut and pasted. Okay, thanks. That's a good.
Okay.
She'll fix it. She's probably fixed it already.
Not a huge one.
Yeah,
it is
that's right. We'll fix it up before it goes on that page. Good catch.
Is it?
Online is.
Oh yeah, cool. I printed this off this afternoon, so good job, Anna. Do you have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? Any questions?
I just have a question for you, Libby. In your superintendent's report, in referencing the yield bill, you said I think the governor's office is interested in adjusting the adequacy formula. I don't know what that is. And I feel like I followed school financing pretty closely this year. Is that a new thing, or is that?
Well, it's an old thing and it's in other states.
Okay.
That's what the legislature is currently wrangling over in terms of how to change school finance. So basically, we'll be paying attention to that in future years.
This is the thing where every district gets what the state deems to be adequate.
Yes.
And then if we wanted to fund higher than that, it would come from more complicated.
That is the most basic understanding of it.
Okay.
That's a good understanding for us to have right now.
Yeah. And that's where adequacy comes from.
Yes.
Adequacy formula. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions or comments about the consent agenda? Before we move on, let's still welcome formally Amani. I don't know if you're actually formally serving yet, or just sitting in, but
great.
So yeah, no, fantastic and great to have you. Welcome aboard. When do you officially start? Is it after the sometime?
We appointed her, so I invited her.
Excellent. Well, I think you can officially start now, unless you can.
All the pomp and circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, welcome aboard. We're really excited to have you join us. I think she's gonna be here the 19th.
Yeah. You coming? Okay, good. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Then I'm.
Yeah.
Then it'll be official.
Yes.
And you'll have already graduated at that point.
Yeah.
I'll be a freshman in fall.
All right, excellent. Let's move on to our update on literacy, professional learning, and we have very happy to have Rachel Whalen and MC Reed join us. So yeah,
We're also happy Mike Berry's here too.
And Mike as well. Oh, we did not vote on the consent agenda.
Oh,
Before we introduce that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Good reminder.
I was like, either I just forgot something big or.
Yeah, no.
Actually, then Jim, before they start, can I make just a quick announcement from the Superintendent Evaluation Committee, just to let the board know that the teacher and staff climate survey is out. And staff will have a couple of weeks to fill it out, and then board members should look soon. We'll send you an email with Libby's evaluation form soon, and the like within the next week or two. And the committee will have a timeline attached to that, so you'll know when we need it back from you by. Just wanted to let everybody know. Mostly as an FYI, but also pay attention to your inbox. Not that you don't already.
Me? Good. No, thank you, Mia.
So for those board members who don't know these two wonderful individuals who I'd love to clone, Rachel Whalen is technically on paper a reading interventionist at Union Elementary School and part of UES's Guiding Coalition, so teacher leadership team. She is now pitch hitting for a kindergarten teacher again. She tried to get out of the kindergarten classroom and we just wouldn't let her. So she's working in a kindergarten classroom right now, but will return next year to reading intervention. And MC Reed is a marvelous second grade teacher. Are you on the Guiding Coalition? No, you're not.
This year.
For
I'm
the
on
second.
PBIS and some other things, so.
Everything else.
Yeah.
So MC works in our second grade and is just simply amazing. And Rachel had field day today. MC missed field day today, so she's fresh as a daisy. So if Rachel just points to MC, then we know that she's
Yeah.
tired from
Yeah.
today.
Well,
Oh my
God.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being here on your.
well, I can think of worse company, so. So thank you so much for having us tonight. We're excited to be here to update you on the amazing professional development opportunity we've had at Union Elementary School and Roxbury Village School this year. And so that professional development opportunity is called Letters. And so I want to just start by giving a little background on why we chose Letters as a district. And so Letters is kind of answered some of the questions we were looking for when we were looking for professional development. We're looking for something that was really comprehensive and ongoing. We had a wonderful professional development opportunity at UES years ago with Christian Quartermanch, who led us through some really wonderful math training. And what teachers gave us for feedback was what worked about that was that it continued. It was ongoing. It cycled, it circled around. And so we always felt like it was just, we had opportunities to answer the questions that came up along the way. So we wanted something that mirrored that for literacy. We wanted something that focused on explicit instruction, especially of foundational literacy skills. And we wanted it to be something that teachers could immediately take into the classroom, interventionists, multilingual educators, special educators, and put to work right away. And so Mike and Katie and Libby and all of those people who make the decisions met with Letters, and that checked all of those boxes. And so we began doing that this year. One of the things that's really great about Letters is the Letters trainers will say this again and again, they're program agnostic. They're not a literacy program. They are an opportunity for you to build your instructional practice. And so that is another thing that we learned as we started the training and was very appealing to everybody right away, no matter what programs or resources or tools we bring into UES or any of our schools in the future, the training from Letters can benefit us regardless. So, and so I'll talk a little bit about what it looks like, and then Mary Kat will kind of go a little bit deeper into that. So this right now is a 2-year commitment. We've been doing this. All of our literacy educators have been doing this for the entirety of this school year. We will continue on into next school year. We've had the opportunity to do the first 3 units this year. So they were the challenge of learning to read, speech sounds of English, and teaching beginning phonics, word recognition, and spelling. And so each unit has about 8 sessions. And some of those sessions we do asynchronously at our Monday staff meeting time, but then some of those sessions we had the opportunity to work in person with letters trainers or virtually with letters trainers. And all of those trainers have just been amazing.
I'd like to just speak to more how that looks like for us. So on Mondays, my team of second graders, we meet together in one classroom and we project it and watch it and do the lesson together. And which is really great because we can pause, we have discussions, we have aha moments, and we're like, and also are like, oh, we got to try this. And that's one of the big things is that we're immediately like going and giving something a try and discussing it. So it's very collaborative, even, as it's this video and you're engaged with it, they have these like check for understandings and like actually every time when you finish a lesson, there's like a test. And so it's kind of funny, like we all like take the test and you submit it and then we're like, okay. And then we have this like discussion about like, oh, why did we, maybe get that problem wrong and this and that. We have the manual and it just is this really great conversation. And you'd think like we've been doing this in September, you'd think like every Monday, but it is fantastic. I mean that really. And it's so nice that we're all hearing the same thing. We're all on the same page. And what's happening for the second grade team is also happening. Every team kind of meets like that. I know the special educators are meeting and Julie Smart and Jen's, they're all, and I see them all in there in their chairs doing the same kind of thing, watching it together and discussing it. So it's not like I'm in my room watching it on the computer. We're all really engaged with each other through this whole process, which also makes it even more enriching, I think, which is great. And Rachel pops in.
Yep.
You've done your sessions and then
Yep.
she's like, I'm going to do it with the second grade today so we can talk. So that's been really neat. And it's really great, the conversations that we have about that. There's also a part in it that's really unique too. It's called Bridge to Practice. And this is where you kind of like pick like some students in your room and you actually go and apply what you're doing and kind of like a case study. And you're like then kind of learning more too. So that's been really neat to do that reflective piece also. And like, actually, so take it, you try it, you're like, and then, so that's been really a neat part of that.
Yeah. And also want to add that some of our staff members are actually taking this for credit. And so they're earning either relicensure credit or college credit for this. And just the other day, one of Mary Kat's colleagues was saying, like, I can't believe I'm earning credit for this. It's just amazing. It's such a great opportunity. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So in terms of what has changed at UES this year that has been influenced by letters, one of the things that letters really hones in on is the importance of that early phonological awareness education. And so kind of what's been happening at the same time, running on a parallel track, is we did an overhaul of our literacy curriculum and really worked on getting our practice and our content aligned vertically and also across grade level. And so one of the things that we brought in this year was the Haggerty Phonological Awareness Program, and that went into our K-1 classrooms and has been just an amazing opportunity for our teachers and our students. And sitting here at the end of a kindergarten year, it's really exciting to see how much the kids have learned. And also having been in the kindergarten classroom before, kids were always learning, but kids are learning that phonological awareness skills in a deeper and more meaningful way. And they've really internalized that. And it's just so exciting to see, really excited to see the data come back on that.
Can you please explain what Haggerty is?
Yeah, so Haggerty is a daily phonological awareness program. So phonological awareness is working on skills like rhyming, syllabication, so breaking words into syllables and blending syllables together. And then throughout the course of the kindergarten year, it goes more into taking words and listening for like first sound, medial sound, final sound, substituting those sounds, deleting them, adding them. And so it's just basically, it's like, we used to call it wordplay. Like you just are playing with words, you're breaking them apart, you're putting the pieces together. And so it takes about, I would say like, it's like a 10-minute burst of instruction. It's whole class and it's very routine. So it's like we do these 5 activities There's a kinesthetic piece, lots of hand signals that go along with it. And it was something that at first was definitely like a learning curve for staff and kids. But now when you go into classrooms, like kids are not just doing it with teachers. Like when we're assessing kids, they're using the hand motions that they do in Haggerty to think about how they're breaking apart words. So it's very, very exciting to see. The other thing that I feel like has been influenced by letters and something that we were already wanting to do already is increasing our use of decodable texts for our early readers, because we know that those are the types of texts that help them to learn best when they're doing that learning to read part before they get to the reading to learn part in the upper grades.
That's been great. Some of the other things that I want to talk about with like these programs like Haggerty Foundations is also letters is putting us all on like universal, like we're all using this universal language. So K1, 2, and on, we're hearing these same things, whether you are in a special ed teacher, a multilingual teacher, a classroom teacher, we're all using the similar like alphabet sounds so that when you come from kindergarten, you hear it again in first grade and you hear it again in second grade and you see those symbols and it just drills in there and becomes like part of you. And like even like the kinesthetic learning, like I've always, like E, edge, or A, apple, at, and you'd be surprised when the kids reading, they'll be like, and it's so part of that is important. And so one of the good things also about letters is that we have all come together where it's not like, oh, I might have known this from my previous years and now we're all on the same page. And so that way everyone's getting that very succinct and important tier 1 instruction, or also then it lends into other tier instructions, which is really cool. And that we're all on the same page, talking the same language when we get together to talk about children and their learning and their reading and where they're at.
And I think another important thing too is like the emphasis is on what's changed, not what's new. Like these pieces have always existed within our classrooms, but what this opportunity this year of, re-examining our literacy curriculum and bringing letters into our school, into both of our UES and RVS schools, is what it's done is, like Mary Kat said, is bringing us together and giving us common language. It's giving us a common experience that we can all share in and reflect on. And so that is new and it's changed our instruction, but those pieces of our instruction were already there to be improved upon, which is really, I think, that's part of what's been beneficial.
Absolutely. We were also even talking about, you and I had an overlap this year of a student when you were working in the tier 2, tier 3 supports.
Yeah.
And it was great. You came back with like, wow, it's working, Mary, because he's already like advanced on, he's talking about stuff that I was doing at this group. And then he was going back with you doing more refined work. But it was just really neat that's what I mean by that crossover connection. And that just like, so that it's great. You're hearing it at the tier 1, and then you're getting drilled more if you need it at like a tier 2, tier 3 level. And that's really great. So it's not a different thing. It's great.
Yeah. So because we don't want that first instruction to be happening at tier 2 and tier 3, that first instruction is happening in the classroom with our general ed classroom teachers. And then when they come to work either at a tier 2 group with their classroom teacher, or they come to the intervention space to work with us, I can work on with third graders decoding multisyllabic words, but I don't have to explain what a syllable is, and I don't have to explain what an open and a closed syllable is, because that great instruction has already happened in their second and third grade classrooms. And so it allows me, like Mary Kat said, to just go deeper with that instruction, and Jennifer as well. So yeah, that was. So in the slideshow, I put a couple of quotes from some of our UES educators. Mary Kat and I are here kind of in that classroom teacher hat, but I also wanted to share some quotes from one of our special educators, one of our multilingual educators, and also one of our reading interventionists. And so while we're not going to read these to you, we just want to highlight a little kind of what we believe are the big takeaways from what they had to share.
I think down here at the bottom, we were talking about that it ensures that seamless transition for students between special educators and the process through grade levels. And that's just what I was just previously kind of talking about. And particularly, Jen's a special educator. I work right down the hall. We're so into this that we're talking about it all the time too. Like when there's something we're like, oh, maybe we should try this. And which is great. And it goes back to that we're all this united team together presenting this stuff and trying things, and I can go and get these things. So I think that's been awesome. Really a really great part of this experience is that like seamless going in, and that we're all hearing the same thing and we're helping each other and adding to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one of the things I wanted to really highlight about, so this quote's from Jennifer Griffith, who's my literacy intervention partner. Jennifer talks about like the increase in curiosity. And when Mary Kat and I were talking the other day, I feel like the two things we've really seen is this increase in curiosity and also this increased critical eye of our educators. I feel like now when we have a program or an assessment or a material resource in front of us, letters training has given us this critical eye where we can look at that and we can figure out, okay, what are the key elements of this? What needs to come into the classroom? What's maybe a negotiable? And that piece too about the curiosity, I was talking about this with my K teammates the other day, is our conversations just in the last year have shifted from that like frustration of like, oh, this kid, like, I don't know how to help this kid, to why is my instruction not meeting the student's needs? What else can I be doing? And it's feeling like the onus is going more onto us as educators and what we can do. And it's like a good problem to solve and not like a crisis that we're in. And so I feel like that curiosity has also allowed us to just support our students better because we're coming at it from that angle.
And because of the great background we've learned with letters, we're saying to each other, well, are they missing? Is it the syllable that, like we're really getting more deeper about like where, like we're talking to each other on this level of like, where is it falling off? Like, and then we've learned all these new like little mini assessments that we can be like, just really more target that, which has been really great. I think we're going to talk later, but just like, some of the vowel valley, and like just these different things of like articulation, your mouth. I mean, I'm learning some incredibly new things that I was like, is very helpful.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to children just about your mouth and sounds and how they come out, it's just been great. And that's part of that discussion, right? We said, oh, well, how was this? Have you tried this? And it's been great.
And also just going to what I was talking about before about how letters is program agnostic. Jennifer pulls a quote here from Louisa Moats, who's one of the authors of the letters manual, and talking about how programs are really helpful tools, but programs don't teach, teachers do. And Libby is a big believer in that as well. And it is true. And that's what I was saying before. What letters is giving us is an opportunity to build our instructional practice. So no matter what classroom we're in, what materials are in front of us, where we go, that isn't going to change. That is always going to be something that us and our students benefit from. So I was really grateful to Jennifer for pulling that quote out because I think it's a really important one for us to keep our eye on.
Well, here's what I was going to talk about this is a quote from Sylvia Fagan and she's a multilingual teacher. And this has been really great about what we've learned about articulation and sounds and syllables has really also strengthened how we are delivering instruction to students who are speaking different languages and so loud. So that's been really interesting too. And like Sylvia taking that back and learning all these things. And I feel like that also is enriching my instruction for all learners. And that's been really fantastic too. And I've just learned so much about like my mouth and how you articulate words and the sounds. And is it lips? Is it stop? Is it Africa? It's just been amazing. And I remember years ago having a mirror and talking, but now I know even more depth about just the oral and how these sounds and how to help when it's like, when there's a stuck thing. And that's been really great. I feel like I'm now can add an SLP to my little.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely been like a crash course in linguistics. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, there's some things that I've learned. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. We're all like, did you know that? I didn't know that. So that's like this amazing, that's been really great.
Yeah. For sure. And one of the things too that from the multilingual standpoint that Letters has spent some time digging into is how, like how we learn sounds in English versus how, like specifically Spanish, they talk about. So they talk about how in Spanish there's only 5 vowel sounds to learn, and then over in the English side of things we have
We got a whole vowel.
yeah, we've got upwards of like 14 different vowel sounds to learn. And so just understanding what that must be like for our students who are learning English as, an additional language and being multilingual learners, understanding like how like all the listening they're having to do to differentiate between all those different just vowel sounds that we're using. And so we've really appreciated that. And one of my teammates, Sandra Carrillo, is a native Spanish speaker. And it was really fun doing those sessions with her because, then we'd turn and Sandra would just basically validate everything that we're saying. She was like, yeah, very difficult. But it just gives us a perspective that we didn't have before. And I appreciate that so much.
Yeah. That knowledge, I've gained so much skills from that. And that's where we break off and have these conversations on Monday. And we're like, oh no, we go by 4:15, I don't know how many times, just because the conversation is rich and we're all like, oh, and then someone's I gotta get kids, as they, but it's that kind of, meaningful instruction.
And in terms of those meaningful conversations too, I'm going to talk about your team for a minute. So
Okay.
I work with Mary Kat's team. I'm their guiding coalition rep. And so I get to facilitate their meetings and work with them really closely. And throughout this year, we've also been implementing these teaching assessing cycles, which have allowed us to dig deeper into formative assessments that we do with our students. And during our second literacy one this year, there was an opportunity, we definitely wanted to look at students and how they were reading. And there was an opportunity to look at decoding, but teachers were actually feeling really confident with if kids aren't yet decoding, I know how to approach that. I know what the tools are. I know what kind of practice they need. But the question of fluency came up, and that is always kind of this, can be somewhat evasive reading skill. And how do you practice fluency? And what we found ourselves with was a lot of that curiosity. We had a lot of questions, and instead of shying away from that, we dove into that and we decided, let's look at fluency. Let's look at how do we assess fluency? How do we teach fluency? And that day after we made that decision, I feel like there was just a flurry of emails throughout the day as people were like, well, I found this article, I found this resource, let's put it all together. You guys created a whole folder.
Yep.
And it was just this really amazing, rich opportunity. It was like action research on the ground, and it was super exciting to be a part of it and to watch your students all grow as a result of it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that is another one of those things that's come from this professional development opportunity.
Yeah, so that was really great. And that's just we've had similar discussions like that throughout the whole year during our literacy and being excited to try something new. We go assess, then we do our cycle, and it's just been really, it's just been really great. You get excited when I'm passionate about learning, not just teaching, but I'm also passionate about learning myself. And so it's exciting when you're in this and I'm learning something new and we're trying it, and then you see its impact. Yeah. It just it fuels my tank. I mean, my tank gets fueled often by lots of, little ones and smiles and things like that. And pictures of me with my glasses on my head now, because it's my new symbol. But anyway, that's just really something I want to make. Yes, I love that learning. And this year I've been learning a lot. So it's been great.
Yeah. And so kind of what's next for us here at UES and with our new colleagues from RVS, we will continue going through our letters training next year. We're going to dive into Unit 4, which is about advanced decoding, spelling, and word recognition. And so that'll be an opportunity for us to build our toolkit around fluency. We are going to continue. We've been learning a lot about these great diagnostic tools as we've been going through letters. And so exploring some of those diagnostic tools at the tier 2 and tier 3 level to help us build these just I guess, more in-depth profiles of our learners and how they're learning and what they're learning and why. And then we'll just continue, I know we'll continue to implement all of that great instructional practice that we're learning about. Our most recent session with a letters trainer was all about how to run a literacy small group and broke down all the components. And what I love about it is, I mean, if you ask any teacher, what are your favorite trainings? It's the one where you leave with something you can do the next day. And everybody, I feel like, went back to their classroom the next day and implemented at least one, if not more, of those activities. And letters is so rich with these activities and having us try them out in real time and experience them the way that our learners might experience them.
Yeah, even when we got on those sessions, you have to come with your whiteboard, you have to come with your something to push up. They say like come prepared with these things, and you sit there and you're practicing, and which is really great. And those are the live sessions, but then we do the same thing when it's us. We have it out and we practice it again, and that's been really great.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's exciting.
It is really good work. Yeah, it's exciting work.
Yeah.
Questions for Bill?
How do you see this like sustaining, right? So it sounds like this is really good, really intense. It sounds amazing. And I love the idea that it's not subject based. It's like universal for all topics. But like if after, 3, 4, 5 years, is it like a train the trainer? Like how does it become sort of baked into?
Yeah, so I'm actually going through the process this summer, becoming our school's Lexia lead teacher. And so we'll build our capacity in-house to continue training new staff as they come on and onboard. And so, yeah, that has definitely been a part of the vision because this has been so good. It's like you want to trap lightning in a bottle, right? And how do you keep it going? So there's been a lot of thought about that moving forward. Yeah.
What was in place before, and why did you gravitate toward the letters model?
So I feel like before we had a lot of
You've got a lot of things in the up in the air, but I think when it came to like a spelling and phonics work, that's where it was kind of a little bit all around. And so I think that's one of the things that came out of this is having something that people were consistently doing K1, 2, 3 up like that.
Yeah. And before you would have a lot of teachers going off and going and investigating workshops kind of their own accord, or teams might go and do a workshop or training together. And there's been opportunities offered within our district in the past. And so there was all these kind of piecemeal opportunities, which were all great, but this was an opportunity to do something that, like I said, was comprehensive and ongoing. And because that's how we learn, and just wanting to do something that's how students learn. Yeah. Well,
I think even as we've got children up to 2nd grade, we would see, some of these holes and we're like, oh, and so I think that this is what this has helped us do is kind of avoid some holes, right? That it's this distinct, it's going here and it's building on it rather than, and I'm like, oh, I was doing some more foundation stuff still over the years. And I was like, oh, I wish they had that, or I'd have to figure out, oh, they do heart words in 1st grade. And I call it sight words here, and helping us that kind of thing. It seems funny, but when I come and I'm like, oh, okay, you've got these heart words and which ones have you learned? Those are the sight words, and then there's all these different things, but getting on so that's one language is so much better, and then that I know what this group has done and what that group has done. And then I pick up from that kind of thing that everyone was doing it. They were teaching these, sight words, or they were called heart words, but I think what's helped us is all get succinct like that. Yeah. Carrying forward.
Well, and they'll say this in letters over and over again too, is that it's not about one accepted scope and sequence. It's not about one accepted, method for what you call sight words. It's about the consistency. It's about having a consistent scope and sequence we're using across the building. And I think before, when we were kind of exploring trainings and workshops and professional development on our own, that's when we were coming together with lots of different options. All very valid and great options, but letters has brought us together and given us that common language. Yeah.
where like someone might like, I really do it this way in my room, I like this way, and I do it this way, and those are great ways. But it doesn't help kids when they go the next year and then they're mixed into a different classroom and they've had different experience, you know. And so you still get to bring your flair to it, but that it's more common, you know what I mean? Like that you're having these similar experiences. And I think that's where versus me going to this workshop and doing this and I'm sharing it, but like now we're all doing it together. That makes any more clear.
It definitely makes sense to have a sort of cohesive approach. How will you know if students are benefiting from it?
So one of the ways that I'm really excited to dig into in the next few weeks is when we already saw it. We're already seeing shifts in the data that's coming forward, but I think we'll use our data, we'll use our teacher eye and observation. I think also one of the ways that we know it's working is just in the way that teachers are talking about reading has changed. And so before, teachers might have, including myself, would maybe get focused on like a grade level text or a certain text level, but not really being able to talk up at depth about what does it mean to be that kind of reader. And so now it's like, okay, we're not talking about text levels, we're talking about skills. We're talking about the skills you need to be a reader. And so I feel like those conversations are evidence that it's having an impact. And then I know that impact will continue to see in our student data. Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah, MC and Rachel, this is awesome. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so excited about literacy. And it's just great. It makes me want to go home and read a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out loud. Yes, absolutely. No more audiobooks. So those of us who are educators know how important learning by doing is. And so you mentioned this, I think you called it bridge to practice. Yeah. And so can you just, you mentioned it and then kind of went, I thought you were coming back. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear more about what that looks like for educators in our school. And then a really quick question. I don't remember if you mentioned this. Is it just K through 2? Is it everyone in the?
It's K through 4. It's all of our multilingual educators. It's special ed and our SLPs are doing it as well.
One little tidbit to that. It's like, how there's the Google chat. And I don't know if remember one day, like all fired up on Google chat, third grade teachers like, hey, what's going on this week? We were all doing the assessment. Like, we're having a debate about,
question four
on the quiz. What are you guys thinking? And, and it was just neat. And then like Google chat just lit up with everyone being like, I saw this, and so, so that was really, and that's kind of funny, where think about that, the whole building literally is, is working on this.
Yeah.
So that was really neat. Went back to the bridge to practice. So what it is, we have I just kind of picked 3 kids and was like, okay, I'm going to try this, and kind of was practicing a few things that I learned that week. And then they give you, because at the end of the session, you print off your bridge to practice things and you have to journal and all this stuff. Yeah. And so, and I just thought, it wasn't required, but I'm I'm going to try this and see how this feels, this added thing. And so I was like, oh, I really like this. And so I was actually trying it out and I'm like, oh, I want to do this further. And just kind of makes me, and I didn't just choose, I kind of was random, okay, you're up here, you're here, you're here. Let's see how this plays out. And so that's been really neat for my own practice to just kind of play with that and journal and write and be like, oh, this did work. Oh, I need to find, what's not working, maybe it's me, that kind of thing. But every week you just kind of go and you sample something and then and sometimes it's not just every week, sometimes it will be something you try over a couple and then you have they call ABC, your folders, and these kids, and you gather the materials about what you've been doing with them. And then you look back and look at the data and then see how it's changed. And that was it's been really interesting to see. Yeah. So. And I saw some, I had one student, who, as the whole class learning, we're learning vowel teams, EE and EA and OI and OY. And we had done this way back when, this funny little thing about OI is in the middle, OY, just this little rap thing. And it was so funny. I was giving this, the thing in January or December, the spelling inventory. And I heard this kid go, "Oh, I is in the middle." And he's writing the word spoil. And I'm like, yes, anybody else hear that? And it was just kind of funny that I thought, oh, all that kind of he's repeating those sounds over and over, even though someone wasn't necessarily ready for that kind of spelling thing, they remembered that that sound. And I was like, oh, it's working.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though we're doing now in the unit for spelling, it's this week lesson, unit 12 and foundations is the OI, but they had it back in January, which is really kind of fun. That's cute. Little tidbit.
Kristen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. One, I just want to appreciate that hearing you both talk reminds me what technicians teachers are and the challenge of taking this really kind of technical and complex sort of, heady and nuanced information and then having to translate it at the classroom level for really, really young kids is just such a challenge. And it's great to hear that you all are just feeling really inspired and really enthusiastic about it. And Mary Kat, I love hearing that you feel that you can still bring your own flair to it. It's one of my favorite words. And it just sounds like it is, there's some fun, kids are having fun. Hearing that this kid is doing his rap while, and maybe doing an assessment is just really great to hear. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and applying all this new knowledge. And I think I'm a little bit piggybacking on Scott's question, and maybe it's a Mike question, but I'm curious how, you all are going through these modules and you're getting these new skills, and I'm hearing about the bridge to practice, and I'm also kind of curious at at a district level, how you kind of take what you're learning here and maybe apply it to areas where we're seeing a general need for improvement across the district, and how you kind of, again, making sure that it's not happening in a vacuum, but it's really being then used to address actual areas, identified areas, for improvement. I'm curious how that's happening. And I also maybe have a request for Mike. I think at the next meeting, we're going to see spring data, and maybe if you could help us to see a through line between this new approach to training for our teachers and then where that's showing up in the data that we'll see at our next meeting.
I'll take both of them. So thank you. So I would say there's a lot that we've learned from this model that's extending beyond the elementary schools, in particular, the rigor and the relevance of it. But the middle school has also been doing a cohort around adolescent literacy instruction with Dr. Sarah Lupo, who the elementary folks will connect with next year. So we'll have that continuance of those two things connecting. And that's been really amazing. And our high school literacy interventionist has also been involved in that Dr. Sarah Lupo work and has been focusing in on vocabulary and comprehension concepts aligned with adolescent literacy. So we've had this whole kind of K through 12 literacy discussion that's been really great. And the other thing that we do quite naturally is the intervention teams at all of the schools communicate really well. And so we're bridging those conversations, the things that we're learning at the elementary school and the middle school, bridging them into our diagnostic conversations, looking at our data, getting more consistent with our data, our local assessment plan. All of that is really melding together really nicely through this. So I think we're getting a lot from it that's impacting district work and district conversation. I think like Rachel and MC said, one of the big things is that the level of our conversations about literacy have changed, and that's shifted across K through 12. That's not just at the elementary school.
Great, thank you. It's helpful to hear just about the integration piece. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any questions?
Okay, well, so sorry, is this year one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've covered 3 units this year.
It's been every Monday. Every Monday is our staff meeting is dedicated to this. Sorry, yeah.
Go ahead. That's a good segue, because I first wanted to just say thank you, because this has been a ton of work. I can tell. I'm a real investment. on the part of the teachers and I'm sure you could have filled your Monday staff meetings with many, many things. And to hear that not only are you filling the time with this, like really devoting yourself to learning this, but also like staying late basically on a regular basis because you're getting so into it is just really inspiring. And so I first wanted to say thank you for that.
I mean, my team on Monday, as I was leaving and we were talking, and I think I said this already that I was coming here, they're like, tell them this has been really an amazing experience throughout the year.
Awesome.
And they're like, this has been one of the best it's been one of the best professional developments I've had, that, I look forward to the Mondays. I'm bringing it right back to my teaching. And, so my whole team was just like, I should have just started jotting notes down because I'm like, oh yeah. But it was neat as I was going out the door, like make sure you tell them I said that. So people have really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
And like I said, here it's June and we're not tired of it. Like that is really, and I mean that, like it's because every week's new, it's information, it's really great stuff.
I don't know what you mean when you say program agnostic. Can you give us a clarification on that?
So
they say it a lot.
They say it a lot. And I think it's really important, and I'm glad you asked that question. So, for example, if you were to one of the programs we use at UES and RVS is Foundations, and that's a phonics and spelling program. It also has a handwriting component in. If we were to pull in a trainer from Foundations, their training would be heavily driven by their program, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But what happens is it really gets you hyper-focused on the program in front of you and doesn't always allow you to think about how to apply it outside of that program. So if I'm not using that program and I don't have that manual in front of me, how do I then still do all this great teaching? And obviously teachers can figure that out, but that's where letters, when they kind of brag about being program agnostic, they're basically saying we're giving you tools that regardless of the resources you in your district and your schools are using, you're going to have the right tools. And so they're not there to, vouch for one program over another. They're there to just say, this is just good literacy instruction.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I got it. I'm definitely a novice when it comes to these things, other than reading to my kids at night, which I do.
Thank you.
I know you do.
I'm also curious to know if there's things that teachers have had to unlearn during this practice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's maybe it's unlearning, but I don't really like to use that term because I think it's more of just building upon what we've known before.
I see.
Or building or just, I don't know.
Just shifting your thinking too.
Yeah.
Maybe you were like, I thought this was the way. And then you're like, oh, I've learned this. And it's like, rather than that, it's made you think of it differently and maybe go a different way.
Yeah.
I feel it's more like a shift than just being like undo.
Or it's that critical eye piece that I was talking about before. It's like, it's not that everything that I've been a teacher for, 15, 17 years now and teaching literacy for many of them. It's not that what I was doing before was bad. It's just that I have the opportunity now to learn new things and add to my practice, which is what teaching is about. Teaching is always about adding more tools to the toolkit and strengthening the tools you have. And that's what I feel like we're doing here. And so I think what it's allowed us to do is, as opposed to unlearning, it's allowed us to look at our past practice and reflect on what parts of that were beneficial for students and what parts of that is it time to replace with a new technique or tool.
Got it.
And so I feel like it's more, like I said before, like that critical eye piece, just like that's feeling very sharpened.
And kind of like the best practice.
Yeah.
Like that, you hear that term, but where you're taking all like these things and putting it together to be the best practice. And I feel like it's just added more to our toolbox and made us think about the tools more critically. What is the better avenue? Oh, we're assessing, we have this one. Oh, this one goes deeper. Let's, things like that. I feel like I have just more, you think about some of the images of the teachers with all the toolboxes and all the things we're carrying. I got math, I got this, I got that. And I just think I've just, collected more in that toolbox, which is anytime you have more, because every child is different and their brains are all different. So to stand in this, that's why like gathering them in a small group and reading and then shifting those things and working with them, because everybody approaches it differently. And so the more tools I have for every kid and figuring that out is better. And
and what I hear particularly MC say a lot in a roundabout way is that she feels the psychological safety to try new things out.
Yeah.
And that our teachers need the time to learn and to think and to collaborate and to do that in a very safe environment without getting blasted. And so I hear a lot of that right now, and that needs to continue to, I went into Dina Cody's room in the beginning of the year, and it was like one of the first days she was doing a Haggerty lesson, and she's like, I'm messing this up all over the place, and my superintendent's sitting here watching me, and that's okay, kids, because I'm learning, like I'm trying something new. I would love to go in her classroom now to see what she's like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
That was
I think you would just be blown away. Like
Yeah.
the kids would practically be leading the lesson.
But Dina felt safe enough to continue on, even though I'm sitting right there. Katie's right next to me,
Yeah.
so that was pretty cool that they're trying new things and feel safe enough to take that risk.
And I think with that vulnerability comes that curiosity rather than judgment or defensiveness. And so that vulnerability allows you to be curious and to dig deeper. And I know that's something that is shifting in a big way in our conversations. And I really appreciate the opportunity for us to do this training in our collaborative teams. And because we very well could just be in our own classrooms in front of our screens doing this in kind of a vacuum. But by doing it together, like Mary Kat said, we pause and we turn to each other and we're like pointing across the room because we're thinking of the same kid or the same group of kiddos, and we're going to do it tomorrow.
Well, even remember the evening class we had for one of the units, we had to do this evening live virtual thing, and someone hosted at a house so that we could all still be part of it together. And I remember because I was out in Roxbury, I was like, I can't. So they Googled me in. So I was like, I'm still like, you know what I mean? Because I was like, I still want to be like, because that's some of the really enriching thing I want to make sure I also say is we've been working on it together as a team, and look at that as a whole team. Like I said about our chats up to fourth grade when they're asking about a question, what did you put for this one? And that's been really neat and powerful.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I'm curious. So Libby, you mentioned the sort of vulnerability that the teachers are allowing for, and then the excitement clearly. And so, Rachel, you said that next year, or you're being trained to be a team lead. I can't remember what the words.
Lexia lead teacher, I think that's what they call it.
And so there's clearly a plan for like moving this forward beyond just the 2-year program. And that's awesome. I'm wondering what other things could we be doing as a board to support that continual learning beyond just the 2 years of the program. And this is sort of open to Mike and Libby as well, not just you two.
I mean, one thing I'll just say is like, join us in our curiosity and join us in our ability to be vulnerable. And I think that goes a long way. And that with that curiosity, I think comes that excitement and that passion to ask questions about what else could we be doing versus what are we not doing? Like, I think those are the kinds of ways that I feel like I'm trying to shift questions as they're coming at me. It's not necessarily about what I'm not doing. It's about what more could I be doing or how could I do it a different way? So when the community and when our colleagues and our leadership join us in that curiosity, I think it will just continue to increase all the results we're seeing from this.
I think about you spoke to the math work we did for quite a few years with Christian Quartermunch, and how once again, we were all thrilled about that work, right? Because we were trying something with kids, coming back, we were looking at math assessments, very exciting work, right? That's gone away. We are still doing that.
Yeah.
I mean that we are and we're all saying, you know what Christian would say. And we have or we get our work together and we're we even have slideshows of kids working. We're oh, remember that? Let's put up kids. What do you see? Different work. I mean, and so that's so even though that's gone, we're still continuing that really good work that we did with him and growing with it. And so because we when you see something like the work with Christian and now like this, when you see its impact in your classroom and on your students and in your teaching, it just fuels your fire, and it like, it's like, oh, this works. This is it. It is, you see the improvement. So it kind of gets you more pumped. The same feel, I feel like we have not lost our Christian quarter munch, like we're going, you know. I mean, we kind of had, remember this year, we were kind of like between the, we were taking breaks between the math when we were doing our cycles.
Yeah.
And because we equally want to do math too. And I'm like, okay, I say we do a math one, a literacy one, math, you know, and then I'm like, I'm not ready for us to do math and literacy.
Yeah.
Because we were just so excited to, and what I mean by that is that we would have our work where we'd do an assessment on a particular thing. And then we look at the data, then we go out and do a specific teaching cycle. And then we come back and reassess and look at that data. How did it change? We're like, okay, well, you know, that was, so we did these little cycles all throughout the year. And that was great. And we were alternating literacy and math. And then I kept being like, I think we can do both.
And I was like, nope. Let's slow it down.
In that same vein, I think something that the school board can do is be mindful that, especially for our K-4 educators, they're generalists. So when the next big concern comes up or the next thing comes up, we have to remember that we made a commitment to focus on literacy and allow that time. You know, this letters training is a big commitment.
Yeah.
And we've had to prioritize that, and we have to stick to that. We have to see that through. And it can be hard because other priorities pop up, and we'll try and figure out ways to do that without destroying our teachers who have a capacity themselves, you know.
Yeah, and we can also communicate it out too, and let the community know what's going on, because you know, the enthusiasm is very palpable, and it's you know, if it's infectious at all, which I think it is, that paints a really good picture of, I think, what's going on at the K-4 level.
We'll talk about this stuff.
Yeah, really.
Also a
We're
financial
217.
Yeah.
It ain't cheap.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not
No,
cheap
good point.
on several fronts. On the human resource front, I mean, they haven't had a staff meeting all year.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that. That's
And
huge.
That has been,
In-service days are dedicated to this. That's a lot of human resource time.
Yeah.
And then also the training in general is quite expensive.
Yeah.
So it's a financial commitment that the board has made.
And it was like the one at the beginning, the in-service at the beginning of the year with, can't remember her name, Rachel.
Melissa.
And yes, fantastic. I mean, people were on the edge of their seats. I got my lawn chair out because, but it was really
She doesn't do
fantastic.
the cafeteria.
And there was dread before it started.
Yes.
I was there. There was dread
Just, like,
before it started.
palpable
Yeah,
tension
exactly.
in the room.
What is this going to be
And I
about?
felt for that woman.
Yeah, right. And then it ended up like literally people on the edge of the chairs are excited, and it was great, and really got people pumped. And we were like, can we get her back?
Yeah.
And we're like, she lives in Vermont. Like it's more economical to get her back here. She doesn't have to fly. Remember that whole.
But what's been great is like, I don't think she's actually been able to come back, but all the trainers we've had
have been
fantastic. And we've all attended different virtual sessions. And so like, in terms of like an investment of our time and money, like this is an organization that like they're delivering on the goods. Like every person we've worked with, I'm like, that was a stellar presenter. That was a great presenter. Like, and one of my K colleagues was saying yesterday, like some of our virtual sessions have been on these early release days. And so it's like, as soon as the kids leave, it's 3 hours on the computer after a day of teaching, you know, even a shortened day. And she was saying, but it doesn't feel like a drag. Like it doesn't feel like she's like, I'm engaged, I'm excited, I'm into it. And so it's the content, but it's also the staffing that Letters does is just phenomenal. I've been really impressed.
It goes by fast. You know, the time goes by fast because you are engaged, you know, and like, so I felt that was really, on those days.
Absolutely.
We just recently had one. Yeah.
Let me circle back to, I think, Jill's first question about the path forward, because I think now after hearing this, I just want to make sure I understand. So it's a 2-year course, and then you're going to be a trainer in this course, or so after that, do we still engage letters, or have we after the 2-year point, have we internalized that? Or-
So letters has there's 2 volumes. There's volume 1, which is what we're going through right now, and that's really on foundational literacy skills. And then there is a volume 2, which is more, when you're thinking about like Scarborough's reading rope, it's more of the comprehension, language, vocabulary piece. And so I don't think a decision's been made yet on whether or not we're going to proceed with the volume 2 piece, but the amount of knowledge that we've learned, and yes, I do believe have started to internalize from volume 1, is allowing us the capacity to then do our own investigations and conversations on what would be covered in the future letters training if we choose not to commit to that. So, because like Libby said, it is a massive time commitment on our part. So, for all of our literacy educators, it's been an amazing opportunity and really bringing us together at the cost of we don't have Monday staff meetings. And so we're lacking an opportunity to come together as a whole staff. And we found ways to do that, but that's not necessarily sustainable to continue to give every Monday afternoon for the next however many years, because you would see detriments in other areas if we continued on that way.
So
What-
next year would look different, but with the same sort of general.
No, next, oh,
Well, I think next year, if we continue on with volume 1, we have 1 more unit. And so I think that there's some conversations about changing the pacing of it. And so possibly would it be, like 2 staff meetings a month for this and 2 staff meetings devoted to something else. And so we've kind of done a lot of front loading this year. And then that's going to allow us to maybe achieve a more like long-term sustainable pace moving forward.
Because Rachel will be certified, and we're hoping to get more people certified, we'll have an in-house trainer and she'll have access to the letters resources for any new hires that we have. They would start at the beginning of this process and be able to have an internal person that we don't have to book out. We don't have to have a virtual component. We have somebody in-house that can do those. And then when we look at volume 2, what we're thinking right now is finding a way to make that optional and supported. Like one of the things we're doing in our professional learning right now is offering courses posted through Southern New Hampshire on campus right after school once a week for 8 weeks. So making it accessible for educators that want to continue that learning, but to be able to have, like what Rachel's saying, to do 4 straight years of no staff meetings is not reasonable. And probably not affordable sustainably, but Letters does things where they offer the trainings as courses for credit, and all of our teachers have contractual opportunities to take courses. So we have a way that we think we can continue the learning, and we're working with Letters to figure out what that could look like.
That's helpful. I don't think I understood that at the start, so it's helpful to kind of put seems like it's a really smart investment.
Yeah.
It's going to pay dividends.
but something Rachel said too, when it goes back to like, how can the board support like half days? Those are a pain for parents. I know they're a pain for parents. But that's how we're using half day. Like we can't pay our entire elementary school educators to stay after school to do this, so that's why we're putting in half days. We can't get subs for everybody, like in the old days where the subs were abundant and you could rotate teachers throughout the day. We can't do that anymore. So half days may be someplace that you see more of in school calendars as we go forward because of financial difficulties and lack of substitutes. But this is the type of thing that we're using that time for. Yeah. Sounds good.
Any other questions or comments?
Rachel's got birthday cake to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This is super exciting. It's really great. It really helps us to know what's going on inside the classroom, and to see your enthusiasm is wonderful. And I know we're a box of fun, but I'm sure you have better places to be on your birthday, Rachel. So happy birthday and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
you.
for having us.
You're
awesome.
Thank you for this work. It's really great. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Excellent. So the summer board retreat planning, and Mia very helpfully outlined in an email to kind of guide the discussion some kind of streams of possible subjects we could talk about. I think everyone has gotten the various doodle polls. It looks like we're probably aiming towards
We're close.
August. We might have to satellite in Mia from Wisconsin.
That is going to have to happen.
Did you miss last year also? Missed something in August last year, but I actually didn't show up this time for the board meeting.
It is
It was just a
looking,
meeting last year.
it is looking like, although, Miss Mommy can't come. August 15th, from 4 to 8 is the winning date, because Mia is the only adult board member who cannot make it. Voting board member, thank you, who cannot make it that day, but if she beams herself in.
Right.
Oh, and August. All right, then it would be August 15th from 4 to 8. Is the winning date.
Yeah. But before I start that, I just wanted to, as folks know, there was some few education related issues at State House this year. Yeah, there was definitely some involvement both by the administration. Actually, I was asked to testify a couple times as well. I don't know if Mia sat in or testified or not, but yeah. So, one thing that just has come up in some kind of internal conversations was, how do we engage? And this is one of the topics of the retreat, but how do we engage at the legislative level when the administration goes in? Obviously, these bills affect us. We have an excellent administration with a lot of expertise. We also have a superintendent who is, I think, really kind of established herself as a leader in the state among superintendents. So I think she is often tapped, and she has some proximity as well. So there just were some questions about how we engage. We're not going to answer them tonight, but it's a possible topic of retreat. But I think as a preview for that discussion, there was a request just to get like a quick overview before we start this discussion of kind of what the legislative session looked like and some of the bills that were out there and some of the things we did to engage. I'll just start. I testified a couple times on Act 127. Basically just detailing the challenges that it posed to the district, the choices we had to make, the fact that we were forced into some difficult decisions without a lot of process, and also the fact that the ground was continually shifting under us made it also very difficult. And I think it, as we're going through right now, it's caused some extreme, heartache for one of our two communities in particular. So I detailed that. And then to the extent I pontificated, I talked about the need for the legislature to be a little more cautious about how they move forward and, make sure that they're kind of making sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And being strategic and thoughtful about education, and also tying it to a lot of other issues around the state. The challenges that education is having are related to the demographics of the state, the difficulty of getting housing, the fact that families can't afford to move into towns, a lot of other issues, and just asking the legislature to kind of be as thoughtful and strategic about how these issues link, and how conversations around, our mental health services and healthcare and housing can trickle down oftentimes to schools. And that was kind of, I think, my engagement, and I was asked both times on pretty short short notice. If anyone else has done anything with the legislature, otherwise I can turn it over to Libby to talk about just a quick overview of what she's done.
I testified 4 times this year. Once Jake was there with me, the first time in House Ways and Means. I don't think you testified that day though. You were
And
there.
just to clarify, I believe Jake was there on his
Professional
capacity.
capacity, although I did embarrass him a little bit as a board member because I think it was like day 2 as board member for you that day. I testified twice in front of the Senate Finance Committee, once with Jim, 1 time or 2 times? Just once, about 127 and the drivers impacting our budget. Central Vermont educators are called to Senate Finance quite a bit because Ann Cummings is the director, the chair of that committee, and she's Central Vermont, obviously. So she likes to hear from, so I went in with Chris Hennessy, Ryan Harity, the superintendents from around Central Vermont. And then I also testified for a long session with House Education Committee around the same thing, the drivers of education. And I particularly spoke to what Jim was just talking about the heartbreaking decisions that our board had to make throughout this budget cycle with House Education. So those are the things I testified on this year. In the past, I've testified on condoms in schools. I've testified on literacy. I have testified on PCBs. I'm called regularly by senators and representatives or emailed regularly about my opinion on such bills. I think those are the main topics that I have. There was one on social media. I did not testify on that. No, it did not pass. It did not. It changed considerably. It's on VPR now around the governor about whether he's going to veto it or not, but it changed considerably and it moved out of schools and more to internet companies, or I think social media companies. Once it went out of schools, I stopped kind of paying attention to it. But I didn't testify on that.
What about the literacy bill? How much has that changed? There was a literacy bill and there was a concern about demand for some inordinate amount of
40 hours,
professional
yeah.
development.
40 hours came out of it. 40 hours came out of it. I did write a letter to the legislatures asking them not to ban certain literacy practices. But I didn't testify on that. I haven't testified on that in several years. So there is a literacy bill in that talks about screeners, which we already do. And it talks about, it talks about other types of professional learning that's more about data literacy, about how to use data to inform our instruction, which is professional learning that all of us can get behind and is needed for all of us. We're just having a conversation about that in our leadership team today. Those were the main components that stayed in that bill. And exactly what you heard tonight from Rachel and MC is a lot of the intention behind that bill that is there now that I don't know if he's signed yet or not. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about it.
Went through both sides.
Yep. Yep.
I think he signed it like a week or so ago.
Any questions on that? Again, we don't want to have the discussion, but I just wanted to give some chance to.
Just as maybe neither of you can answer this, but how does your activity or our district's activity compare to other districts in the legislature?
There are definitely certain superintendents that are tapped to testify more often than others based on the topic.
Got it.
So for instance, Mark Tucker, who's retiring in a week and a half, but his schools were hit particularly hard with PCBs and that whole process in early. And Mark has become an expert in PCBs and that whole law. He testifies weekly on PCBs, you know, like he's our guy to go testify on that. Lynn Coda, I testify with Lynn Coda quite a bit. Lynn Coda is amazing at testifying around mental health needs in schools and how schools have become the social net and how we're almost robbing our mental health agencies because because our mental health agencies are struggling. And so we have to pick up the slack, and we're actually stealing people from mental health, like she's excellent at that. And so Lynn Coda testifies quite a bit and testifies around mental health, special education pieces. I was asked to testify quite a bit about financial matters this year, because we were in a challenge and we worked really hard to figure it all out. And I was pretty vocal at the trustee level because I'm a Vermont superintendent trustee, which is kind of like the board of directors for the trustees. I'm on that. And I was pretty vocal before emergency red lights started flashing. I was pretty vocal about some aspects that I was seeing as problems right away.
Are you still talking about 127?
127, yeah. And in that group, and determined to learn the impacts. I asked Jake and Jill and Morgan Daybell, who's the head of ASBO. Morgan got to be one of my best friends during that because I was asking a lot of questions, and so trying to figure it out. And they wanted superintendents from districts who are having to gain tax capacity and lose tax capacity. They wanted a mixture of people who could talk broadly about it, not singularly about their district. And having had experience in Franklin Northwest, which is a very different district than Montpelier-Roxbury, I could speak on multiple levels of how I could see this law impacting us. So I think that's why I was tagged early and often for that particular law.
And was this year pretty comparable to other years in the legislature for you as far as like frequency? I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I think it depends on the year. Yeah, I think it depends on the year. I probably was there a little bit more than I usually am. I certainly watched more than I usually do this year because of all the conversations and Ways and Means and but that's not testifying, that's just paying attention to it, having it on in the background. I'd say it was I do testify every year on something.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that probably the watching was because you were making a budget and wondering if you were going to have to throw the spreadsheet you had out and start with a new one.
That's why I was watching.
Yeah. We all were watching a little bit more than we usually do.
Okay.
Jeff Francis, it may change because Jeff is retiring. But Jeff Francis definitely picks people to mentor to how to testify. And I was definitely one of the superintendents he chose a few years back to teach how to testify. So all of my testimony goes through BSA. It's not just me writing it off. It goes through the Vermont Superintendents Association.
Got it.
Chelsea may do it differently with Chelsea Myers taking over the BSA.
Other questions? And again, we will likely have a deeper dive on this or potentially the retreat, so we can.
Is there a problem we're trying to solve? Or
I think what we're trying to do is just some questions were raised about people on the board just wanting to have, I think, a few things. One, making sure that what our administrators were saying, we knew and were in the loop. So we weren't hit by hey, your superintendents at X at the legislature and be like, we didn't even know we were talking about that. So just so we're kept in the loop. And then also the ability, some issues have political and community reverberations that we may want to weigh in, that kind of go beyond just the expertise of our staff. And then someone else in the discussion raised just kind of knowing how, and I think Mia just alluded to this, knowing how our superintendent is using her time. And just, the legislature can be a sticky place. And, just kind of that balance between weighing it strategically and maybe not getting over relied on by the VSA or having it become, too heavy a distraction. So I think just those type of considerations. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure that, you know, if Libby is testifying or someone else is testifying, the board knows, and maybe with the realization that isn't always going to be in real time, because sometimes it's, you know, 10 a.m. you get a call and you're like, we have a hearing at noon and can come in. But you know, so it's not happening here, and then we don't have a clue or find out, you know, through other channels.
There's also, this year was different in that I didn't do a lot of prepared testimony. I was asked to come in to answer questions, and I didn't know what those questions were going to be, except for the broad understanding of 127 and our budget. And there was a point in time where I was eating, sleeping, and dreaming our budget. So like I didn't have much, I didn't prepare something to hand in, right? That would go on a public record often this year. So that's another thing to consider. And then the other thing I'd like to say too is that our principals rarely testify. I think Jason's done it once, and our teachers do testify, and I don't know when they do. That they do not ask me, they don't talk to me about that, and that's a line that's not drawn. That's a line that's drawn because they need the freedom to be able to. It goes back to psychological safety. Our teachers need to feel safe to be able to talk to our state representatives about their opinions and their perspectives, and I trust them to do so. So I know that several of our teachers testified this year, but I didn't know before they went.
Well, for what it's worth, I appreciate that. And I've always been really impressed with your testimony, and having been someone who has listened to superintendents testify my entire 20-year career with the state of Vermont now. I can't believe Jeff is not going to be there.
I know.
If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I also think they needed to hear from superintendents in real time. I'm thinking of there was the hearing about the school budgets getting defeated. It's not just our school budget. There are districts that were very low spending districts who were getting hammered. And they needed to hear from those folks who maybe the outcome of a budget being voted down was the same, but the reason or the impact can be very different.
Yes.
But I definitely want to balance that with a respect for your time, because it's true, the more that they'll take all the time. And I had 3 days this summer where I went in and said the same thing. three different
committees.
Yeah. So I definitely want to support protecting and balancing your time and making sure that there is a superintendent who can be heard there.
Yeah, no, I think we.
And you too, Jim. I thought you did a fantastic job. I really appreciate
Thank you.
your comments.
Yeah, no, and I think with, you know, I think we do want to have, I mean, my feeling, and I know we need a discussion, is we do want to have that balance, especially with, I think, a year or two when there's going to be a lot of important bills, and we have a citizen legislature that, you know, as you said, not at the table and not at the menu, but not everyone in the legislature is an educational expert, and we know that they're very weakly staffed. So there's a lot of good intentions, but you know,
Meaning they don't really have staff, not that their staff are.
they've got a couple like legislative council.
Right, they don't really have, right.
They don't really have staff. They don't, they don't individually have staff. Yeah, they don't have offices of people. Yeah, no, they don't have it's not like Congress where they've got 18, 22-year-olds working for them.
No, they have middle school pages.
Yeah. Yeah, so that expertise and perspective is important for them, and it's important, the policies that impact our district. So we, Mila and I kind of sat down and bucketed 5 areas where we thought, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but I have very basic questions about the board retreat.
Yes.
First question, and they're very basic. First question is, why is it called a retreat? And second of all, is it a public meeting?
Great question.
Yeah.
So called a retreat because it's always been called a retreat.
Yeah. First question is force of habit. Second question is yes. I think there was a time when we would walk over to the Vermont Historical Society and use a room over there just for a change of view. And then sometimes a couple times we've done, it has been a while, we either had a facilitator or we've talked about what we'd be if we were a tree, you know, to kind of, help mix it up a little. I don't think we've done that the last couple
If
times.
it's a board training,
Yes.
then that can be done in executive session, like an actual training. Pietro's here to talk about employment law or something like that. That can be done in executive training. But if it's the board's business, there's no reason that it's not a public meeting. It's a public meeting.
Is it held here?
Yeah,
I
it
think
will
it
be, yeah.
probably will be. I mean, we could.
It would be nice if we could retreat.
Yeah.
I was thinking the whole time, like, we were gonna go somewhere more fun. Or
Buy some water.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Maybe.
Maybe we'll bring some chocolate chip
Yeah.
cookies.
Well, we
Yeah,
have
snacks.
We will
Yeah.
have food because it's 4 hours, it's gonna be 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Let's
So
do
we
that.
will have food.
Yeah, we'll have like a lunch and then we can consider a space. I mean,
Well, there's a new law that says you have to record every meeting now. So we'll be here
okay. Okay. Libby just answered.
for our friends from Orca.
Maybe we can, bring fun drinks or something.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Any other just kind of basic questions about the retreat before?
I was just gonna say, I just put the stuff that I put in an email into a blank document, so Libby could put it at least up on the screen, so we all have
Yeah.
the same, we're all looking at the same thing, and everybody who's watching online or watching afterward. I was gonna ask him, after Jim does our little preamble here, I was gonna ask Tim how he would bucket it.
Yeah, so the ones we came up with, and I'll let me and Libby know how I got this wrong. Kind of continue to work on district priorities. I think of our three kind of goals or outlooks, or the exact word we landed on is escaping me, but kind of the solidifying communications and community engagement seems to be the one that we've given the least form to. And so one thought was spending, and we can do multiple of these, but we also want to be cognizant that even though 4 hours is a long time, we can go back quickly. So particularly the communications and community engagement piece is one where I think at some point need to do more work to give that a little more form and a little more substance about how we really want to get there. And I know some ideas have floated. So that was one, is to use some time for that. The other was to, because, hopefully we will not have nearly as difficult a budget year as we did this year. I also don't think that the money tree is going to drop a lot of money either. So one might be to realize that we may have some hard decisions to make, hopefully not nearly as hard as we did this year, but to kind of outline how we would kind of apply values and priorities in terms of making those decisions. So that way we kind of have some agreed upon parameters for making tough decisions before the actual substance of the decisions are before us. Because once it becomes a thing and someone's thing, and emotions get high, it can be a lot harder to kind of stake out why you may want to invest in A but not B. So if we maybe spend some time deciding what parameters and values we want to bring to that decision, we can at least have more guidance when it's there and not quite be so swept up in the moment. Part of that, well, this might be a whole bucket in and of itself, depending on where we are. I do want to give an update that, as promised, I have been reaching out to Floor. Floor and I have been going back and forth, and we are pretty close to getting a date for me, Olivia, and I to meet with her and I think her vice chair, and also they are having a superintendent transition, so probably both the outgoing and incoming superintendent to continue our discussion about possible merger or other collaboration with Wash Central. As you may know, They did not have a fun time either. They did pass their second budget, actually quite a bit more narrowly than we do, with a lot of tough cuts. And they are going through a process of consolidation where they are considering the closure of, I believe, 2 to 3 of their elementary schools. And I think there's definitely some, I think a lot of questions being raised during that. I think part of it is why aren't we talking as interdistricts? So that, depending on how that conversation goes and what happens over the summer, we may have a lot to talk about.
Just a really quick question, Jim. At some point, I remember there was a reason why they wanted to wait. They were going through some, I can't remember what process.
They were going through a building evaluation process. And when we talked, it was also before we all knew about Act 127 and what that meant. That was their primary reason. I think the consolidation process that they're starting a conversation on now has been informed both by their facilities overview and I think where they are with Act 127. They're also experiencing, which looks like it's not a trend that's reversing, a major decline in student enrollment. Right now, I think in like the next year or two, the combined number of students in Doty and Rumney is going to be less than what Rumney was about 5 or 6 years ago. And that's kind of across the board for them. So, that's adding to their financial pressures as well. Parameters for superintendent and board legislative advocacy, which we just kind of touched on. That may not be a super huge conversation, and that may be one we could do in a meeting, but I think it's definitely one, just given some things that have been raised both tonight and elsewhere, that we should have. Board and superintendent communication, and I think just kind of communication in general. And then board equity training. We're thinking of that as a training as part of the retreat, or just talking about trainings we wanted?
Doing the training at the retreat.
Okay.
Is the idea, if we chose this one.
Yeah. And I think something we might want to talk about regardless is what trainings the board would want. I know we've got some new members. We definitely, I think, want to do at least an equity training once a year, but we have to by policy. We have to by policy. And but there's some other trainings that have been beneficial, and I think with some new members who haven't had them, there's like the VSBA gives some just kind of trainings on communication, both inter-board communication and also communication with the community. Pietro and Heather Lynn's firm have some excellent trainings on the law around harassment, employment law, some other things that's good. It's good for the board to know. We haven't had one of those in a while. And as Libby just mentioned, a training does not have to be a public meeting, so we can go into private space and talk about difficult issues without being on camera. So, and then Tim, you had another that you wanted to potentially put up there.
Yeah, something in focusing on sort of academics and how we facilitate parental engagement and support of their learners, sort of whether it be on the enrichment side, remedial side, and making sure that it's something that can be done, something that allows sort of parents to really kind of engage or facilitates the engagement, I guess, in parents' ways.
Between parents and educators, or
and their kids, so that if parents say we've been having this kind of email discussion about algebra, and that's one that it's very being the parent where my kids are, it's very live in my circles, and so there's a lot of discussion about so how do we, if there's certain things that we want to make sure it's have, like, where do we go, how do we do it, all that kind of stuff, and do it in a way that's complementary to what's happening with the school. And so I think that kind of, it's a topic that I heard a lot about, and I thought kind of wrestling with that as a board and kind of saying, how do we try and set the sort of parent, school, child triangle up for the best success. I'd love to talk about that.
Do you think that would go within communications and community engagement, or do you feel like it's a separate thing?
That was my question too.
Is it part of the communications and community engagement?
No, I think it's, at least in my mind, it's much more an academics focused conversation, but I mean, honestly, if someone wants to put it somewhere.
Well, the reason I was asking is because when you talk about facilitating parental engagement, it sounds to support the kids' academics, all kids' academics. It sounds like it is
I think he's saying parent advocacy for academic programming. Is that about the?
Well, there's some of that, but then there's some, if something's not, whether a parent wants something to be provided doesn't mean it's going to be provided. And so then the question would be how a parent can best provide that on their own without.
Okay, I see. Different. Okay. Yeah, that is different.
Really, like, cooperative kind of relationship. And because there are times that I've, frankly, have heard feedback that it can get to a bit of a headbutting, and I think that doesn't behoove anyone, frankly. So, I've had ideas like just, syllabus and sort of stuff that I know teachers have already, if provided, in a way that parents might be able to sort of, I noticed my kid's having a tough time in this area, so I want to look back and focus there. Or I think my kid can do a little bit of that, so I want to, well, then the resources are there, and it's not putting parents who are busy anyway to go search online for, this, that, or the other thing that they believe it's worth. So I guess I just wanted to, it's one of the things that, I guess when I was running for the board, I was really interested in, and then we got into some budget discussions. And
sure did.
So I thought when I saw this retreat and it being an opportunity for a little bit of a step back, deeper thinking, that this might be a time to raise this point that has been really important to me. If it's shared, honestly.
I'd be interested in because I don't know what it's like now, like what is a situation where a parent, like you say, is looking for help in some subject or looking for supplemental to elevate, their student in some subject. I don't know what the lay of the land is. So I feel weird about talking about it when I don't even know what is the situation now. So maybe we've had a lot of presentations, maybe somebody could tell us what goes on in those situations. I don't know who that would be though.
Looks like Lynn, did you?
Yeah.
I was wondering under the equity piece, we had a whole equity study done, and I think there should be something in there about implementing some of the recommendations or deciding what parts we're going to try to implement the next year.
So then I think if I remember correctly, one of the recommendations that came out of that was specifically around the board and our training. And so I do think it's carrying forward some of the equity audit. And I agree that a revisit would be helpful. I mean, because you're in the equity committee with Mia, we've been doing some of that work already. And I think more of that would be useful.
Yeah, I think it needs to get spread out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking for the equity training, Mia, if we are going to present data using disproportionality in the future, that the board needs training of how to read those, how to understand disproportionality and how to, without looking at our data yet, but how do we look at it? What questions are we asking? What is disproportionality? What is it not?
I would love that training.
We've been doing that as administrative team right now. So I was thinking about it today in our meeting that this would be a good board training as well. We are not experts in it, but we could certainly lead through So like that could be an internal training using Mike and Jess and myself around what is disproportionality and how do we look at data in this way?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's sort of similar to Kristen's comment about next board meeting. And when we're receiving data, I think it's really helpful for us to understand the context and then also like how to interpret those data that we are receiving.
Yeah, something like that would be a good integration of a lot of what our role is, which is one of the reasons I think we get those data presentations is because we are the accountability of superintendent and the administration. And then we also have that woven into our priorities is to ensure that we are serving all kids where they're at and regardless of what their identities are. So I can see how that would cover a lot of what we're trying to do as a board, that particular
I
think Kristen is trying to get a cue.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I would also appreciate, and I think we've talked about it as a board before, just the need to better understand how to interpret, understand, and apply data as it's become a bigger part of our presentations in the last year or so, and as the district has invested in an incredible amount of time and energy into really like actually just creating a data system that didn't exist before. And as follow-up to what Lynn was saying, just sort of, we've had some really, really significant audits of the district over the last year and a half, including special ed, equity, and while maybe not an audit, we've just had this very significant strategic planning process for our facilities, and they've all been quite voluminous. It feels really important to like not just check that box, we did the audit, but really to kind of understand the life beyond the audit and kind of our responsibilities in terms of implementation, decision making, and kind of future of the district, and then maybe even how those things kind of tie back into our priority areas. And I think for me, the bullet I'm not double screening. So, but kind of, it sounds like there's impetus to sort of create like a framework for when hard decisions come up. And there's sort of a forecasting of some of the things that we anticipate seeing. And I would add to that list, and also within the facilities, topic area, there's something really significant hanging out in the breeze for the community of Roxbury, which is the fate of the Roxbury Village School. The board has made the decision around moving Roxbury students to UES. However, RVS is still kind of within, I think as Libby, we were talking to, it's a district asset. It's within our building inventory, and our community is very eager to understand what the future intended use of the building is in the district. If the district intends to, look for, seek out, research a new use for the building, because there are big, and this is going way back to, our Act 46 agreement, but the town, the community is kind of biting their nails on what is to become of the building, because it is such a central part of the community. So I just want to add that to that list. And I think just generally speaking, it feels like we have some really big facilities things on the horizon, and just follow up to the facilities strategic planning process that I would like to dig deeper into, like beyond framework, but just like more learning about that.
Yeah, that is another excellent bucket as facilities. We obviously have the RVS question. We have the high school question. I think some of those kind of marry to the Wash Central question. And then I also like the comment about, I think we have to do very intentional work to make sure we had some excellent audits this year and over the last couple of years. And, part of the retreat might be just making sure that we prioritize time during the year to have check-ins on, follow-ups on those audits, and, what we've learned from them, and make sure they're not just, sitting on shelves.
As you're saying that, Jim, I don't remember, it was early in my tenure on the board last year in the summer. Did we also plan out the board calendar in the retreat?
I don't think we did last year.
Okay.
But that might be a good thing to just, and that kind of goes to maybe just on what trainings are we looking for, but also what data presentations, what updates. Just so we can get a list of things that we want to make sure we get to as the year goes on.
We've got an agenda for like a 4-day retreat.
Well, I was gonna
Yeah, I was
say,
gonna
I
say.
think that's what we'll end up doing with some of these items because we just have the 4 hours and it will probably be that what we say is we can't get to all of this in one retreat, but that they become meeting topics.
Yeah, I know exactly. I mean, I think we will discuss all of those things. I guess the question is, what do we want to prioritize for the board? And I guess if we don't have more items to add, I wonder one thing we maybe could do is people could just sort of labeled 1 through 8, maybe write down their top 4 on a sheet of paper, and we could see which top 4 emerge, and then me, Libby, and I can try to do an agenda based on that. Does that sound like a good way to go about it? Or
That was that
would email you.
I was just gonna say, that's the like analog version of what I was gonna suggest, which is a mini Google survey, but I'm
okay, let's do
pieces
Google.
of paper.
Yeah. Why don't we do a Google survey, and that can give people some time to think about it too.
Yeah. Before we do that, before we close this though, I want to make sure that if anybody has, because we'll be asking you to kind of vote and say, these to me feel like they're the ones that will set us best up for success is really the question we're answering. Does anyone have any questions about what's up there before you say, before we send you the Google?
Can we say a little bit more about the number 4 board and superintendent communication? Because it did feel like it's a little bit related to the parental engagement question, but it's also part of our priorities, you know, and separated from the education piece. Can we talk about fleshing that out a little bit?
Yeah, so it's written like, I first want to thank you for asking because I had wanted to clarify. It's board and superintendent communication, but it's not just board to superintendent communication or the other way. It's more like board among the board communication as well as board and super with.
Not to the public or from the public.
Correct. It's more like us and how we communicate and work together. And Rhett, I can't remember if you were on the board at this point, but I was still fairly new. We had one sort of online mini training with I think it was the Montpelier Justice Center on sort of like, it was sort of conflict resolution, but it was also just like how to communicate and collaborate. But it was really pretty brief. And when that ended, we wanted to continue doing that work together so we could establish some norms for ourselves. I mean, we have policy for how we conduct meetings and how we conduct ourselves as board members, but we don't have anything that goes deeper than that. And so that would be work to help us co-create, you know, so like values and norms and how we communicate and collaborate. And also how when we do things, say something or do something that kind of is like an ouch moment, how do we address that together? Does it have to be like a whole board meeting? Probably not, but like, what are some of the parameters for how to encourage dialogue in those moments so that we can move through them and be able to work together? Would be a part of that.
Yeah, I guess as you're explaining that, Nina, I'm kind of envisioning that as like a 4 and 5, like they all kind of go to trainings on different, you know, like that seems to be like a communications training, equity training, and I wonder, so as to preserve space for as many topics during the meeting as possible, we like.
Oh, you're a combo guy.
Well, I just wonder if we kind of trainings, unless we're gonna have the training, which I'm totally game for too, if we want to use that time to have a specific training.
That was the idea, was to get in what either not necessarily a training, maybe it would be a training, but I was envisioning it as more of a conversation among us to set some of our own norms together. But it would be how we would use some of the time during the retreat, if that's what we chose to do.
Feeling like there's a lot of synergy between 4 and 5 there, but.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, I think the the
Maybe.
DEI equity training is something we have to do per policy. I'm not sure that it's a training. I mean, the board and superintendent communication could just be a separate training we did at another time as well. And I think part of that too is just, like when the board members, making sure the board members know that they can go to Libby and talk things out. But also knowing that as a board member, they should go to Libby before they go to a principal. Those type of things. And I'm not sure we've had even some of the basic things for some members. I think some members who've been here for a while kind of know those things, and then, when you're which hat are you wearing when you're talking particularly to, people in the administration?
Or teachers.
Yeah, could you add under to the, facilities report, just specifically how to add that to the little list of things there, because it isn't just deciding what we're gonna do about changing a facility, it's also about like repairs and prioritizing. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that report that I think might be part of too.
I think that's what I put for number 8.
Oh, whoops. I didn't see
I
it.
added as
Sorry.
as its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Agreed. It's a big thing.
Want to add to that bucket of stuff, reconsidering the net zero idea, because I think that got left by the wayside when we had our budget.
Would you put that under 8 or as its own thing?
I think that's number 8.
Part of 8? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So it does appear as though many of the items in number 2 are a part of that is better understanding our facilities. I do think that there's a significant overlap between 2 and 8.
I don't totally agree with that. I think number 2 is more about,
It's not about making any decisions on those things. It's more about what are the criteria we're going to use when it comes to that. The inspiration for this one is that in the last several years, couple of years anyway, we found ourselves making big decisions on a very short timeline and would not necessarily with the same kind of process and deliberation that that they called for. And so it was a little bit more about like, if and when the time comes that we have to make the decision about this high school, for example, how are we going to do that? So I just, that if what you're trying to do is combine 2 and 8, I wouldn't combine 2 and 8. I think I agree with you that we do need to better understand our facilities as part of being able to make these kinds of decisions, but I wouldn't combine them as the same topic for the retreat.
So the word communications is like a very sort of broad, it can mean a lot of different things. And even within this room, it might mean different things. So I would want to talk a little bit more about what we would be looking for on 4 and 1A, because I do think, and again, I'm obviously probably a little more engaged in like your average Montpelier, but I get fantastic communication. Like no matter where I look in the morning, I'm seeing that our board meeting is happening, that there's a budget vote. Like I think Anna and I think Mia and Jim and Libby, like you guys do an amazing job of communicating to the community. And I also get really good, really regular updates from the high school, from Mr. Kingold. And also when there are things that happen, that has also been really lovely to have, like, so when my kid shows up, I have some context or I can ask her rather than like, how was your day? Fine. I actually know, oh, you have STARS testing next week or whatever, because otherwise I wouldn't know. So so my statement is I think the district communications functioning is really good. Like I think what Anna and Libby do, and I think what you guys do as board chair and vice chair is really good. I don't have complaints about that. So I guess I would wonder, or I'd want us to focus on where do we see that there is a pocket? Because there's been lots of times that you can send surveys, you can host, right? You can host conversations, and it might be either that it's a self-selecting group or the people you really need to hear from. As we've all tried, like it's very hard to hear from some of the voices that need to be heard. So I wouldn't want to just sort of be like, we need a communication strategy with our social, because I do think we have a really strong, like concrete, but maybe that is like, where are the places that we want to focus that concentration of our prioritization, right? Like, is it certain topics? Is it certain subgroups? Is it age ranges? Is it related to like, we're not reaching folks? Is that we're not reaching folks where they are? I want to know a little bit more about that, or like when we're talking about it, have it be something sort of actionable that like, because I do think the district does a very good job. And I think the leadership at the schools also do a good job.
The 1A is the continuation of establishing our third priority. So I think you might remember last summer, we got really clear and very specific about the first two priorities, academics and social belonging, safety, and wellness. And we didn't have the time to get really clear and specific about what success looks like, what are our measurements of implementation around communications and community engagement. So that's what 1A is to get that third priority to the same level of like concreteness as those first two. And that would include not just our outbound communication, but also how are we hearing and really using what we are hearing from the community.
Thank you.
So what you were just saying, there are echoes of what Tim was talking about before around the community engagement in 1 and I can't remember what number it is, whatever, but the 6, the engagement of parents supporting their kid, right? Engagement is a multiple way street, right? And so I think it's really important to not just understand how we are communicating out, but how we are bringing that communication back in and using that information. And so I do think it's worthwhile to dig into that.
And like, maybe some measurements and expectations around communication, because let's be honest, you can have excellent communication and there are either people who don't pay attention and will scream about it, or don't get their way and will scream about it. And sometimes if you just hear the screaming, the scream will be the communications was terrible. And I think sometimes there's an impetus to respond to that and say, oh, we did something bad. How are we going to do something better? I mean, having some measurements around looking at, was the communication really terrible? Or do we just have a member of the public who didn't read 17 emails, or did read 17 emails, but in the end got an answer they didn't like, and therefore the process was followed. I mean, I think having some measurements around that, around our expectations, would be helpful.
And blind spots, I think, Joe, what you were talking, like if you are a community member who didn't have reliable internet or didn't have a job that required you to be exposed to email, would you have the same level of understanding of what was going on?
Well, and as we have learned between a global pandemic and then a massive flood and all these things that we've all gone as a community, there's not as bright a line of here's the school district and here's the community and here's this, like, so I don't know if community engagement might also be like talking to the select board in Roxbury and our city council up there about housing, and like, here are some concrete things that are like I know we lose teenagers and we lose state employees because they want to come here and they are willing to take a pay cut, but they cannot find a place to live. And so like, is part of it, maybe this something like the SBA or something like that, but like, there is a huge overlap. That is a very interconnected problem. I should probably be like, I shouldn't say this since I'm volunteering to go to city council and like engage. But that's something else that sort of comes to mind that I do think, I don't want us to just be like, there is some community, and then people might, it's sort of a light bulb, like, oh, this is, my property taxes and housing and education are all,
they're all
intertwined.
Going back to the communication piece, I think this year we've done a much better job in terms of informing the community, which was really not great, I don't think, before. I'm sure the school community knew what was going on, but like I said before, as a person who's a grandparent but doesn't have kids in the school, who has to read the emails and find the sports schedules and all that stuff. I didn't have a lot of information about the school, and I hope that we can keep up that level of communication, not just because we were in a budget crisis. I think we really just have to continue to get that information out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think for our community members who do not have children in the schools, they do not get a lot of the communication that we get. And sometimes the communication they get is from places like Front Porch Forum, where the communication is, to say generously, uneven and sometimes
Unreliable.
Sometimes unreliable. And yeah, and I think we have to make sure that those community members are informed of what we're doing. I mean, they obviously don't necessarily need to know that STARS testing is next week, but I think they need to know what we're considering budget-wise and some of the, the broader things that impact them and their taxes and et cetera.
I just wanted to say before we get too far into actually having any of these conversations. The next step is to determine what the biggest priorities are for the retreat. So in order to be able to give Jim, Libby, and me that input, does anybody feel like they need to better understand any of these items here?
Number 2 is quite big.
Yeah.
Number 3 is actually quite small.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So, if we voted for 3 small things, it might not take up 4 hours. So I don't know if you want to make a few bigger topics or something.
Okay. I think
Could be
that's
like a communication heading with 4 subheadings, where that is one of the communication things. I don't know.
I think what I'd like to do is just leave them numbered as they are and then see where the votes shake out. And then Jim, Libby, and I can figure out how much time do we think we need for certain items. And then maybe there is we wouldn't call it like miscellaneous, because none of these are actually miscellaneous, but maybe there's a section of the meeting that's quicker things.
Yeah, why don't we do this? Why don't we set up the Gold Monkey survey or Google poll or whichever one we want to use. And then we'll have some space for comment, so people can prioritize and then give comment too. And then we'll look at it, and if something just naturally falls into place, we'll go with it. If it looks like we need to do a little rearranging, maybe we'll do a couple agenda proposals and set that out for another poll. For instance, we got a lot of suggestions to merge these 3. So maybe the merger of these 3 and we can do it that way.
Hey, Jill.
Yeah.
I think Jill had her hand up and I also have it.
Oh, sorry. So would I be voting for a 1A or 1B, or would it just be the numbers?
I think
Just the numbers.
But then you could put comment and say, I voted for 1, but I think 1A is more important than 1B.
I wonder if it makes sense to just kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is more work, but just use these as promises. We just all articulate what our top 4 priorities are in our own words, so we're not kind of. Because it's kind of like your comments idea, and it's not too many to roll out. No.
I think open-ended questions are very difficult to interpret on a survey, and so I think an opportunity to provide open-ended, but having defined criteria would be more useful. I do want to. So we've got an outgoing student rep, we've got an incoming student rep, and we have a staying where you are student rep. What are we missing, or are we missing anything? From your perspective?
I had to figure some things out, like Robert's rules and board structure, and there were a solid couple months where I didn't know what MTSS meant, and I was just really confused. But I don't know if that needs to be at this meeting. I think that now that I understand those things, that can be something that I can teach Amani, but
Maybe a refresher.
yeah, some of that, like stuff about how the board works and our policies and procedures is probably good.
That would be helpful for
everybody.
new board members too.
Yeah.
Many,
Trainings.
many moons ago, the equity committee, or at least a couple moons ago, the equity committee had started to kind of draft the skeleton of a new board member onboarding packet of sorts. So that is out there in terms of something that could be further filled out. I don't know by whom, but we do have that because I think it's a recognized need by everybody, that everybody kind of, a lot of people come onto the board and spend a good year sort of treading water and a bit confused, and that's not been a unique experience.
The School Boards Association sends stuff in the mail, and I don't know if the student reps get it, but I've been reading it. It's really super helpful. I could bring in my stuff and you could borrow it if you don't get it. But it's pretty concise. It talks about like Robert's rules and other basic board functions.
I also think VSBA is now doing a kind of monthly networking check-in for student members also. I'll see if I can find a link to that and send that to you, Miriam and Amani.
I wasn't sure if they were still meeting regularly, but I can check in on that.
And we should, yeah.
Ian, could you also add to number 9 role, like what is our role?
Oh, yeah.
Like the parameters of our.
We can get that out in a couple of days
Yeah, good point.
to have folks chime in to see what rises to the top.
So our last item of business is policy monitor C10 prevention of harassment, hazing, and bullying of students. Do you have a motion to approve the C10 monitoring report?
So moved.
Do you have a second? Second. Any discussion or questions?
So, just really quick question. When was this first updated? I know it says it somewhere, but.
The policy itself?
Oh, 2018. Yeah. So I'm curious. I forget it. I think I was gonna say a question, Libby, but I think you've answered it before about how like the progression, like how things are functioning now versus when the policy was younger in its age. But I feel like you've answered the question.
But they're updated along with the lawyer, right? I mean, it's on here because somebody looked at it.
Yeah.
That's our role.
Yeah. And training we want to have is Heather Lynn's training on this because it's very helpful. It's a tricky part of the law. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Before we adjourn, just want to congratulate Laura and all of the seniors on their pending graduation, which is going to happen before we meet next, but great work, everyone. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everyone.